So, for the last part of the game block today, let's see it as sort of an outro to all the things that we just heard. There's a lot of insights, a lot of stuff happening. These people have worked with some amazing other people, and I'm interested to hear about the collaboration. Like I said, in the true spirit of Blend, I think the focus should be on, what does interactivity add to these types of media and this type of art. And yeah, we're not going to do the question part of it, but we're going to go a bit deeper into what we just talked about in a panel. And I think the chairs are ready, so let's get up on stage again.
Okay. How are you, Floris? How do you feel?
I feel good.
Okay, good.
How do you feel?
Good.
It is cold. Let's discuss the cold here. No,
it is a little cold.
Yeah.
But all these people have blankies. So
yeah, nice blankets. Yeah, so there's so many interesting topics. I kind of have to wrap my head around what I think is super interesting, and maybe you have things that you want to bring up during the talk. But one of the first ones, I guess, is just the sheer element of interactivity and sort of what that does to a media project, because a lot of people here will have experience with film and with animation and all that stuff. But the interactive element to things brings a whole different dimension, right? It makes games one of the more collaborative art forms as well. So I'm curious what your experiences are with that. And let's start with Floris, because you have a big background in animation and in film, and this was sort of your first big game project, right? You even went to a game publisher for it. So what were like the first challenges that you came into when you suddenly had to make something, that people would actually touch and have a lot of options in as well?
Yeah, well, it's a completely different world. Like Adriaan already mentioned, playtesting. I never thought about it. I also created some interactive projects before, but never playtested it. And that also caused those projects to be not very user-friendly. And we did playtest with this project, but not as extensive as Adriaan told in his project. And I think, well, this is the first time I created a game. And when I would create a next project, that will probably be a game again. I think this playtesting will also become more part of the start of the project. I started with a visual idea. I started to create that visual idea I had without any gameplay in the back of my mind. And then Tijmen came in. He was an intern, and
he was a programmer, or
he was a student at the St. Joost.
All right.
And he's still a big important part of the team now. And he started to make prototypes.
Right.
But I'm not a gamer myself, so I think during the whole project I've been focusing on the visual side and the contextual side, and the team has been focusing on gameplay, and I'm also learning it now, and I think in next projects it will become a bigger part of the development.
Yeah, because does that also mean that you were sometimes inclined to take away the interactivity a bit in some parts? Like you're used to people following your story and sort of being on the roller coaster of what you're making, but now the roller coaster can suddenly go left or right as well, at the disposal of the player. So were there many moments where you thought, let's take it back a little bit and keep it because the movies, obviously you just watch them, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Is that hard for you to do, like as a creator, just to shape these options, even though you want to tell this?
Yeah, there was.
story?
I needed to learn that. That's why I also think that it took 5 years to make this. I also needed to adapt my ideas and my visions, but I now realize that a game is a game because it's also you should be able to play it, of course, and it should be fun to play it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a difficult balance also between trying to tell a story that you think it's important, and at the same time creating a joyful experience.
Yeah. Because Adriaan, you mentioned you like working with people who have no games background. I imagine similar challenges arise there, right? Like you can tell them how to build something, practically, but do you have a lot of trouble sort of lobbying the idea of games and that stuff can change, by the hand of the player, or is that sort of assumed already?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because especially people like illustrators or sound designers, they're not at all used to this iterative process that they make something, they put it in a game, and then they see how a player reacts to it, and then actually they have to change it because it doesn't work. Because usually most illustrators, they're used to making a very pretty picture, and that's it, you know, here it is. But in a game, it also has to work. It has to convey something. It has a context. Maybe there's a 3D model somewhere that is too big or out of style, or perhaps it is a UI button that isn't clear enough somewhere. And so I really need to, you know, shove it into people's minds in this case. That they need to go through this iterative process, this process of just putting it in there and seeing how it works. Yeah. And actually what I have started doing is asking people to sometimes put something in the game within 15 minutes, as opposed to letting them just simmer and do their own thing, so that they already get used to the idea that, yes, there is stuff in the game right now that is not good, and that we need to change. Because if they can get used to that idea, they can slowly also get used to the idea that the stuff that they do really want to make and put in the game that is good might also not be perfect yet. Yeah. So I try to really get people to use placeholders. I really try to get people to just put something in just to see how it works, you know. Yeah. Yeah. And that is for most people a bit of a process. But once people get there, I also find that it's hard for them to return back to the more regular Illustrator world.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I mean, the whole idea of the interactivity is that it should add something. So what, for you, Floris, for example, what does it add for you most, now that you've seen both sides of the spectrum, right? You've seen all kinds of media. Now this is the first actual game you're making. Somebody already mentioned, you know, it has similarities with other more, you know, traditional games inside your project. What does it add most for you? Like, what are you seeing with players?
Yeah, what I was looking for with my previous project, especially the Modular Body. The Modular Body was an online science fiction story which had a lot of different fragments on YouTube, which took about between 1 and 2 minutes. And I noticed that a lot of people, they just watched one video or maybe 2 or 3, and then the experience was gone. So I wanted to make something. If you make a feature film, which you can see in the cinema, people are in your story for 2 hours. And I wanted to achieve that with interactivity. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, was to create a game where you can, well, if people, the demo we just released, people were playing it for a few hours, and that's just a very small slice of the game and the story. So right. That's, for me, the most exciting part of creating games, right. To involve people into a story world and suck them in for multiple hours of playtime.
Right. Yeah, I've seen in my experience with, for example, lobbying with the government, which is always a nice group to tell, you know, what games are. I always have a hard time explaining, you know, what the biggest like joy is in playing games. But I imagine you, with all your games, you see a lot of this, like, right? Like people who don't game that much or aren't identifying as gamers, but suddenly find that spark of joy. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the key to sort of convincing people how fun it can be to interact with something and do something instead of just, you know, instead of just playing it?
I think the key is something you need to figure out for every project, every time. Yeah. I think, like, for most of my games, if you now look at a lot of the marketing material we made, we try to make it obvious instantly. You know, you see Hint Folks, you immediately see a large miniature world that there's just so much little things going on. You see Fingal, you see 2 people touching each other's hands, you immediately understand, oh, okay, I know what this is. This is a kind of disgusting finger-rubbing game. Right? Yes. Yeah. Or you see 2 people dancing with a phone. You're like, wow, what the hell? That is genius. How does this work? You know, dancing with a phone. That's weird. Yeah. So I think it's different every time, and you need to figure it out every time. Right. But yeah, when I talk to people who don't identify as gamers, I think they tend to connect more easily with the non-video game appeal that some of my games have.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a particular genre, I guess, as well, right? Like trying to find the people who don't play games. Because Floris, you really had to look for a new audience, I imagine. You had to like make sure that this was an actual game that the actual gamers could also find and enjoy, and then you have the whole shell around it of the other medium, if you will. For this, you went to a publisher, right? A traditional game publisher. Humble Bundle, if I'm not mistaken, or Humble Games, I think their publishing label is. Did you find any challenges in trying to find your vision? It's interactive media, but it's a bit broader than the usual game. Did you have any struggles with that, or?
Yeah, I have to say that Adriaan helped me a lot with it.
Oh, cool.
It was, I think, at the start of 2020. I wanted to make a pitch because we had fundings from Dutch cultural funds, and they were, we ran out of money. And the only way I thought we could finish the project is to reach out to a publisher and ask for an investment. But I'm from the world of art, the cultural world, not the commercial world. So I didn't have any idea how to reach out to a publisher. And then I created a pitch. I sent it to Adriaan for feedback. He completely burned it down. And
as he does, yeah.
Yeah, and then I created it again, and Adriaan kept having comments and problems with it. But then eventually I thought to have a good pitch, and we went to GDC and got in contact with a lot of publishers. And then suddenly there were multiple publishers interested in getting involved into the project.
The Holy Grail, yeah. You can actually choose then. And how did you make a choice? Is it also talking to other people? I mean, you didn't know these publishers probably, or not yet?
Yeah, I was. I'm also on there's a Slack channel called Dutch Game Industry Slack, and I started to ask questions to people also about contracts and about agreements. What should the revenue share be and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's then cool. The most practical solution was Humble Games. They had the best
deal.
The best deal for me. So.
Yeah, that's just for context. Like publishers, usually, indeed, you pitch to them, and it's going on like quite large sums of money. Sometimes productions can be long, but Adriaan, you've stayed independent for pretty much always, right? Also, in game oftentimes, and also now for yourself. Have you ever considered working with a bigger party for like, a bigger production maybe, or do you want to stay, independent and keep making the smaller games, if you will?
Good question. I've certainly considered going to publishers. I think a lot of publishers, they are good at marketing and good at business, and especially when it comes to needing money, a publisher can be the perfect partner. So if you need those three things, funding, business, and marketing contacts, going to a publisher, I think, makes a lot of sense. But I also have to admit that all the games that I made with Game Oven, so stuff like Fingal or Bounden, that is not publisher material. No publisher in their right mind is going to fund a social experiment and both also do marketing and business for it. So there, our options were very limited, and that was also a hard time for us to make sure we were able to make a living. So to be able to make a living, we did some work for hire, and we got subsidies from the Stimuleringsfonds, and we looked for money everywhere, and so we ended up trying to survive. And luckily for me, after I quit Game Oven, there was a little bit of money left on the bank. And with that money, I think it was like 30,000 euros, I could pay myself and Sylvain just a little bit. So after a year and a half, we could release Hinfolks. The month after Hinfolks released, I would have been completely broke if it weren't that Hinfolks did extremely well on launch. I think the first day it made like 40,000 euros. So that's a lot of money, and that gave me full confidence that I did the right thing, not going to a publisher. And I was able to do a bit of business and marketing myself. But I also have to say that because of all the weird games that I've made previously, I had pretty good contacts with Apple and Google and other platforms. So I felt that I didn't really need a bigger publisher like that. But perhaps to answer the latter part of your question, would I ever want to make a bigger project? I think some of the projects that I do are secretly already a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Right now, I usually fund my own games. So that means that funding is limited. So I'm not going to have a 20, 30 people team on something. But my projects shrink and grow. And sometimes they're 5 people, sometimes they grow to 15 people and then shrink back again. So I think my projects are already pretty big, usually. But yeah, I'm not interested anymore in having a studio. I really just enjoy too much collaborating with people, and every time finding a new project and finding the right people to fit with that project, I just enjoy it too much. So it's worked for me until now. It might not work for everyone, but it does work for me. So
awesome.
I'm just going to stick
with
it.
Yeah, I'd say it's very welcome as well. It creates very diverse kinds of games, right? And games that we've never seen before, which goes for both of you, and that's nice. So on that topic of sort of game diversity, if you will, it's kind of our role here as well today to inspire people to get into games a little bit, right? Like if they want to, like our friend in the back there. You already mentioned programming. It's sort of a hurdle, especially for artistic people very often. Yeah. But in the past few years, luckily, we've seen this democratization of game development, right? With visual scripting being a big part of game development as well. Like there are games being made now without any programming. Yeah. Would you say that to make anything, you can just get started? And what software, for example, would you recommend if people are super interested? You already mentioned Unity.
Yeah.
Is Next Space Rebels also Unity, actually?
Yeah, it's also
Unity-based.
Unity.
Yeah.
I'm not a programmer, and I think I will never be, but maybe after Adriaan mentioned spending 3 months on it, I would like to try it.
Yeah. Yeah, because is it not interesting to you to program, or is it just the sort of, the knowledge barrier, I guess, of having to get into that? Or what is keeping you from, or has kept you from doing it so far?
For now it was a time reason.
Right.
Although we've been working on this for 5 years, so I might have tried it. But I thought to focus more on the context and the art direction and the overall direction of the game.
Right.
But it would be more handy if I also had some programming knowledge, especially while bug fixing. I'm completely dependent on the team. So.
Right. And do you maybe have any tips, any of you, for sort of getting into the scene, perhaps by collaborating with people? Like, what would be a good place to find others that can help you?
That's a hard question to answer. Yeah. I think if you're a student at a school, definitely collaborate with other students. Maybe do it even outside of classes and school projects. If there's someone you see whose work you like, you approach them and say, let's do a little thing together. Maybe make a small game, maybe do a game jam together. I think that's a very easy, low-hanging fruit way to find collaborators. And I mean, if you want to look beyond that, the way that I usually find collaborators is by knowing exactly what and who I need. So, if I have a dancing game and I realize I need choreography, that already narrows my search. And if I know we're going to need a designer who does a little bit of graphic design but also is not afraid to dive into UI, okay, then I'm going to look on the internet and ask around for people who can do exactly that.
Yeah, so very practically, you actually just Googled people, or you scanned Instagram and you found...
Yeah, and actually Sim Kaart, who is the illustrator with a fantastic name, I found him because literally someone told him like, oh, you like this guy's work, maybe you should check his Instagram out.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's how it goes. You talk to people and you discuss these kinds of things. But I think one thing that's relatively easy for you if you're interested in finding collaborators is to literally look around you and see who makes cool stuff and ask these people to make something with you.
Yeah, because I think many people would agree that games are probably the most collaborative form of media these days, because it has the technology for the programming, it has art from all kinds of sides, and it has that design, right? And then all the business around it, of course. But just for context, Next Space Rebels, you mentioned the team is 5 people. What is that composed of for you?
That's the core team.
Right.
But the actual people involved in the project, the group of people is much bigger, because we also did a film production. And there were also, in an earlier stage, other programmers. There's a QA team in Poland with 20 people who are testing the game and
Yeah.
trying us to get activated to fix bugs.
Yeah.
And then there's the publishing team, which is also 15 people or something like that. But we are with 5 people, or 5 people is the...
And that is sort of divided by programmers and artists, or how does that?
Yeah, we have Tijmen, he's a game designer and programmer and writer. He also did a big part of the writing. And Maarten, he's the programmer and also partially game designer. And then there's an artist, a producer, and me. I'm the game director and also artist, 3D modeling and video director.
Everyone wears many hats, I guess.
Yeah, and now since a few months there's also UI developer.
Right.
And that's not it's some sort of a studio setup now, but like Adriaan also said, I also like to collaborate with different teams for each project.
Yeah.
And this is a completely different team than my previous project. So maybe in the future we'll see what will happen.
Complex productions, that's for sure. Because studios like Ubisoft, they have studios of thousands of people. They do 24-hour development clocks, right? And they make these blockbuster games. Adriaan talked about ambition already a little bit. Like Floris, would you say that you want to keep making these types of games, or do you want to make bigger games? Because this is your sort of first big foray into games. Are you here to stay, or are you going back to...
I really hope this will... because I don't think I can switch back to another medium for now. The next project will also be a game again. But I don't know yet what, because this is such an intense period right now that I can't really think of something new. But the intention is there to stick with this medium. I was looking for a medium to be able to stick with for a long time.
Right.
And I think games offers everything I'm interested in right now.
Yeah, there's this famous game designer, Joseph Fares. He's from Hazelight Studios, and he has the expression that he came from film as well. He made 3 or 4 feature-length films in cinemas, and then he stepped to games. And then people asked him, like, are games fun? Are you ever going back to movies? And he says, I'll do movies in my holidays. Like, that's how much easier it is to make movies. Would you agree with that, or is it? Like, is it really a step up for you as well, or is it?
I don't know. I think, especially now we're even with a small team, I can imagine if you're in a team with 50 or maybe 100 people, that's still considered a small team, I think, in the world of game development.
Yeah.
But that will be even more complex than it is already now. And also the whole system behind it, and the idea that you need to have some sort of progression and multiple hours of fun gameplay that's addictive, or at least it's fun.
I think this is kind of a discouraging message at this point. Like, don't do it. It's
but can I say something about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think no one in their right mind starts a project that's already 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's how it works. Because I think most projects that they start with people thinking, it's going to be done in 6 months. Maybe a year tops. That's probably what you thought when you started. And then, it grows, and you make a version of the game, you realize, no, actually, this is not what I wanted, and I wanted something bigger or more, or it's not fun yet, or I wanted to make it even better, or there's things missing.
That's also what I think is interesting and dangerous about making games, that you can, with a film, when the shoot is done, you can change the edit, but then that's it.
Yeah.
And with games, you can go on endlessly with making updates or improvements.
Yeah.
And then you turn out to be 5 years working on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I had the same thing with Hin folks. We ended up working on that for 5 years.
And a lot of it is about that iteration, right? That play testing. Like, you have a chance to show the game or the product to anyone already touching it, right? And already interacting with it. With movies, I mean, I'm not super familiar with movies, but I think it's much less like that, right? You have to get a final edit in before you can, show it to people, right? So is that maybe also part of the power of play, that you can sort of test and adapt to what the people want? So it's not as much as a release, let's see what happens. It's more of a process to work.
Yeah, I think so. And there's this term in the game industry, or in game industry theory, game theory, that's called emergent gameplay. And that's, I think, to some extent, everything is emergent gameplay. If you put something in front of people, you never know what's really going to happen. Like some people might do the exact thing that you had in mind, but others might treat a certain mechanic that you came up with or a certain interaction with the game in a completely different way. And it has happened to me that seeing some people play in a way that I hadn't thought of inspired me to make another game. So the game I talked about, Friends Trap, where two people hold on to the same phone and when you let go, you lose. When I gave that game to two specific people who started acting weird with it, they started rotating it.
Bounding, yeah.
There you go. And so that was completely emergent gameplay, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is certainly like a part of the design process. I think there's still a lot of people right now that also in game design that feel that they can create a system and that they can calculate and know from the get-go what they're going to be making.
Yeah.
And usually they're very logical, the games.
Yeah.
But I think most games these days, they have a vague idea of what's going to make the game fun, and they make a prototype, and then they see what that thing precisely is, and then they just focus their full attention on that. Yeah. And if you don't get to do enough iterations, don't get to do enough making it better, you end up with a game that you know could be more fun, but it's not yet. Yeah. And I have that feeling with WordWeb, for instance, where we actually figured out halfway through our final milestone that the daily mode was the most fun thing. So now I would have actually structured the game in such a way that the daily mode is more prominent. But the game's already out, so yeah. We're probably still going to do it in an update, which is also very nice that we're able to do these things. But yeah, this is certainly, it ends up making the game more fun, and yeah. People end up having more fun because of that. So I think that's certainly one of the powers of
awesome.
Games.
Yeah, I mean, games are never done, I guess. We are done, actually, looking at the time here. We do have 0 minutes left. So I want to thank you again for going a bit more in depth about games today and showing, hopefully, maybe some people who weren't as familiar with game development, what it's like to make a game. And yeah, give them a warm applause.
Thank you.